Funding for the Dick Cavett Show has been provided by this station and other public television stations, and by grants from the Chubb Corporation and Gulf and Western Industries Incorporated.
Good evening again from high above San Francisco, where our vantage point is the top of the Hotel St. Francis. Some people are wondering why it's light at this time of night, but occasionally we have tape during the daytime. We're not in Stockholm. The address of my guest tonight in Santa Rosa, California is 1 Snoopy Plaza. And for at least 100 million fans, they think that hint alone should identify him. He's Charles Schulz, creator of Peanuts, which is probably the most successful comic strip in history, and it's also the inspiration for films, television specials, calendars, greeting cards, dolls, any number of other spin-offs. And Peanuts enjoys its special place in our culture because Mr. Schulz pours a lot of himself into the characters. I think that's a defensible theory. And Charlie Brown, Lucy, Schroeder, and so on. And he does so in ways that enable us to see a lot of ourselves in them as well. Well, anyway, will you welcome, please, Mr. Charles Schulz. I was shocked to hear that you don't like the title of the strip.
I think it could very well be the worst title that anyone has ever thought of for a comic strip.
That's disillusioning. That's like hearing that Vivian Leigh didn't like Scarlett O'Hara or something like that.
No,
how can you...
I should think rather than disillusioning, it should be illuminating.
Illuminating. Yeah. That's what I meant to say. Yeah. I always thought they meant the same thing. How, did someone foist the title on you?
It was foisted, and I think this is one of those unfortunate things that young cartoonists and young athletes and young actors and actresses have to go through. We're always being forced to do things that we don't want to do when we're trying to get started. Of course, I was so obsessed with drawing a comic strip all of my life that I was willing to take anything that anyone gave me, and who was I to argue with the United Feature Syndicate?
But what did you want to call it? Certainly not the Grapes of Wrath or some...
I really wanted to call it Good Old Charlie Brown because I knew Charlie Brown was going to be the lead character. Although I realized that comic strips don't live or die on the titles. No one knows that Popeye really was called Thimblefeed and that Maggie and Jiggs was bringing up Father. Nobody cares about that, so it doesn't really matter. But I just resent that I've been stuck with kind of an ungainly title like Peanuts.
How, for example, did Snoopy evolve? Did you realize you needed a dog and you decided not to be a poodle, an Afghan, what? Or had you always had this image of Snoopy from the beginning?
Snoopy was one of the few dogs that I could draw reasonably well. And
that's just how you draw a dog.
That's right. Which is why I don't have a cat in the strip, because I draw terrible cats. But I did have a dog who was somewhat like Snoopy. When I was about 13 years old, he was a little bit larger than the dog that Snoopy is, but he was marked in a similar manner. He had the white body with a few spots and the black ears, and he was kind of wild. He had an understanding vocabulary of about 50 different words, and quite bright. And so Snoopy really was patterned somewhat after this dog whose name was Spike.
Spike is the inspiration for Snoopy. Right. What do you mean a working vocabulary, or what do you call it,
well, he could. The dog couldn't talk, but he could understand a lot.
You mean like go get my gloves or
That's
something?
That's right. He'd do anything. He had all. Yeah. He even used to ring the doorbell. It's the only dog I've ever known who could ring the doorbell. When he wanted to come in, he'd jump up and against the doorbell, and it would ring. We'd have to go down to the back door and answer it and let him in. It's kind of a nuisance.
Did he ever do that as a prank on the neighbors? You know, ringing him around
on Halloween.
The thing, if you had Snoopy do that, it wouldn't seem remarkable because he's capable of so much. But
Snoopy kicks on the door. He walks up, and he kicks it, and goes bam, 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 bam. That's one of the fun things about drawing a comic strip is drawing sounds. I like drawing things like bam, bam, and pow, and kapowie, and things like that.
Yes. As a kid, I always liked kerblooey the best. When something would blow up, it would say kerblooey. Before we went on the air, people were asking you things here about where your ideas come from, and you said sometimes they come from your kids, but Not...
Yeah, I couldn't have made a living off the 6 ideas that they've given me in 27 years.
6 ideas?
6 ideas.
Your children have hardly paid off at all, have they?
One of the best ones, I think, was the one that our youngest daughter came up with one day when she said, I just discovered something about prayer. She says, if you hold your hands this way, you get the opposite of what you pray for. And I thought that was kind of bright. I like theological things anyway, so I used that one.
Is that the daughter to whom you said once at the table, could you be quiet for a little while?
That was Amy.
That was another one. And later she began to butter some bread and said, am I buttering too loud for you?
Yeah.
I mean...
Yeah, that's 2.
That's as good as any line in a Groucho Marx movie. That's a wonderful, wonderful line. That's all she's come up with, though?
Nothing recently.
Nothing
yeah, they're getting too old. Yeah.
Why Charlie Brown and not Charlie Green or Charlie Smith or...
I used to work at a correspondence school in Minneapolis, and there were about 25 of us who were there as an instructors, and one of the men who became a very close friend of mine was named Charlie Brown. And I always thought it sounded like a drunk in a bar. And I'd say, well, here comes old Charlie Brown. Now we can have a good time. And everything's going to be all right now because Charlie Brown is here. So all of his friends, including myself, began to call him Charlie Brown. When I sold the comic strip, it did not have any definite characters in it. And the syndicate said, you'll have to come up with some definite characters and names. So I asked my friend Charlie if I could use his name. And I can still remember the first day that I drew Charlie Brown. He came walking over, looked down at it, and said, oh, I'm so disappointed. I was hoping I was going to look like Steve Canyon.
Have to go to another cartoonist, I guess, for that. When Joe Hardy, who directed the original Charlie Brown, You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown show, was casting it, he called me in, and I was surprised that a number of people there thought that I should play Charlie Brown in the original New York production.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see that at all?
Oh, definitely.
Really? What is
well,
it?
I think you have 2 qualities. You probably would have ended up being a better Linus, but I think you have 2 qualities for Charlie Brown. One is that of innocence. And I think the other is the appearance of not knowing what's going on.
I think so. What about doing it for TV? Does that present a whole new set of problems for you?
The animation?
Yeah.
Yes, but I think that we've been reasonably successful because we have not tried to change the characters too much from the comic strip to the animated form. We have done nothing more really than make the characters move. The difficulty has always been with the voices. It's very hard to find the proper voices, and then when you get a good one, the kid grows up, and that spoils it. He leaves you without a voice.
And people have perhaps preconceived notions of what the character should sound like, and you have to try
I gave
not
up
to
a long time ago.
disillusion the greatest number of them, I suppose. Has this thing, the whole phenomenon of Charlie Brown and Peanuts and so on, succeeded beyond your wildest dreams, or did you always think it had a good... Or your wildest dreams even wilder than this?
Well, yeah, I still have got a few things going on, but I suppose I'm like Arnold Palmer. I always dreamed that I'd win the National Open, so he won it. Why not? I always dreamed I'd have a comic strip, and I always dreamed it would be pretty good. I had no idea what I was going to draw. I was willing to draw an adventure strip or any sort of thing, but I knew that I wanted to draw a comic strip. I was raised back in the days of Skippy and Popeye and all of those old great strips and the Bungle Family and
You're called Sparky, is the nickname. That's from Sparkplug?
The day after I was born, I was named after Sparkplug, so that kind of helped a little too. Yeah. And I never knew the man. 25 years later, I met the uncle who gave me that name, and he wasn't too happy.
I liked Nancy.
Yeah, Nancy's
I always liked the Nancy comic strip because I always wanted to be like Sluggo.
You're a good Sluggo.
Sluggo, between Sluggo and Robert Mitchum, that's how I see myself. Does it appeal to kids or adults more, the Peanuts strip, or if you don't mind me referring to it as that?
I'm very glad to say that I think we cover the whole spectrum. Most of our mail comes from children, but we get letters from psychiatrists and grandmothers and everybody, and theologians and everybody.
Do you ever get complaining mail where people say, how could you have them do this or that?
We had quite a few people who were disappointed with our last television show where Lucy pulled the ball away from Charlie Brown several times during the important game. He was to come in and kick the extra point, and each time she'd pull the ball away and he'd land flat on his back, and they kept blaming him for it. Well, Unfortunately, I don't always get to see these shows until the last minute, and I think the people were right. Maybe we overdid it, but it's still a cartoon, and it was funny anyway. But
have you had a word with Lucy about this?
She's...
I guess if I meant anything by asking you that, it might be, do these characters exist for you as real characters?
Yeah, I haven't taken it that seriously, but I think about them all the time. I think if you were going to succeed as a cartoonist and drawing a comic strip, this means something funny every day. It's like having to have an English theme. It's Sunday night and you have to have an English theme for Monday morning. Well, it's always Monday morning. So it never leaves my mind. I'm continually thinking about it and kind of obsessed by the whole thing. I'm really a comic strip fanatic.
And is it the cartoonist nightmare that you just get 3 frames and can't get a 4th one?
Yeah.
Something like that?
It happens all the time, but you learn to live with it. You learn, well, maybe tomorrow will be better.
Do you keep pad and pencil on you at all times to jot ideas?
No, I always forget them. I wish that I had, but then I forget them.
One of the great things about the strip is that it's not cute.
I'm glad.
You know what I mean by that?
Yeah.
You know, I can imagine somebody conceiving of a similar idea and making it icky and kids with those Walter Keane eyes and you know, I just couldn't bear it if it were that. I think probably one of the reasons that it has such a wide appeal is that it's not icky, sweet, cute,
I appreciate
that sort of thing. Are you ever pirated?
Oh, I'm stolen, as they say, blind.
What's to keep a paper in Hanging Squaw, Montana, from running the strip and you're not knowing it?
Well, United Feature Syndicate, of course. The syndicate owns the copyright, and they spend a fortune every year trying to track down people who steal the characters, mainly for products and things of this sort. It's impossible to steal a comic strip as a comic strip. Overseas is the most difficult place. Places like Hong Kong, and they steal, they have no respect for the copyright laws. So it is really difficult. The thing has been stolen from me most has been the happiness is a warm puppy idea. There's a whole feature now called Love Is, which is stolen from the definition book that I had, Love Is Such and Such, but I don't care. It's, I remember that great line from the Red Shoes, it's better to be stolen from than to have to steal.
Tell about, you were in World War II. I was told to ask you about a story involving a grenade.
Well, it's kind of embarrassing because it makes me out to be an amateur soldier, which I guess I was. We had just captured a very tiny village, and I had leaped out of the half-track. I was the squad leader of a machine gun squad, and I ran down to the edge of the village to, hoping to find a Luger. Everybody wanted to find a Luger as a souvenir.
I still want a Luger.
Well, I'll send you one someday.
Okay.
And I found an artillery emplacement, and there was a stairway that went down to a little bunker where the men had evidently been billeted, and it was very dark and awesome. But the door was open, and I thought perhaps I could sneak down there and find something like that. I had a concussion grenade on my belt, so I thought I'd be very dramatic, and I'd roll this concussion grenade down through the door. So I took it off my belt, and I was just about to toss it when a little dog came walking along, trotted down the steps, and went into the house. And so I thought, I can't hurt a little dog, so I put it back in my belt and went back with the rest of the guys. And that's my story. That's why the war lasted as long as it did.
Schroeder, or Schröder as he's known in Germany, is the most cryptic of the characters in some way. He's a bit of an enigma, Beethoven and so on.
Yeah.
How did Schroeder evolve?
Actually, I suppose his name is pronounced Schrader, but I always call it Schroeder. He was named after a friend that I used to caddy with back in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I never knew what the kid's first name was. Everybody just called him Schroeder. Yeah. But I like Beethoven and Brahms and all of those great men, and I just think it's kind of neat showing complicated musical scores that are actually the scores.
Those are the real musical figures.
Yeah, I have music books, and I just copy them out. I'm getting real good at it. I don't even have to letter them in ahead of time. I can just write them out, and I can always get a job someday writing musical notes if I have to. And I enjoy drawing those. I just think they look kind of neat. In fact, the first Peanuts book that ever came out was discovered because one of the editors for Reinhardt, named John Selby, was a pianist himself, and he recognized the 29th Sonata of Beethoven when he saw it in the strip as being played by Schroeder. So he started to read the strip, and this is why it became a book eventually.
Okay. Would you draw one of the characters for us now? It'd be interesting for art students and even non-art students to see where you begin.
Yeah, it's not very hard.
This fellow here, Snoopy, do you start with his head, his tail? Does it matter? Can you start anywhere you want?
Well, it's best to start up with the head. I'm going to show him at his typewriter. This is the world-famous novelist. He also writes letters and things like that. This is the author of the world-famous novel, It Was a Dark and Stormy Night.
Can you see that all right?
He's writing home in this case here.
That's very good.
It's kind of hard to do.
Is it hard at that angle? That's not your usual.
Especially since I can't see up that close with these glasses. Normally I take my glasses off and I draw.
When you draw at home, right, do you have an easel or a flat
Just a regular drawing board, and I sit in a room all by myself. I think you have to be the sort of person who's willing to be all by yourself and not a world traveler or something. I'm a lot like Charlie Brown's little sister, Sally. She says, I don't mind going someplace as long as I can be home by noon. And I'm very much like that. So I think you have to be this sort of person who's willing to spend his whole life just sitting in a room drawing pictures. And it is fun. Sometimes I will admit that when I have a good idea going and I'm lettering the thing out, I chuckle to myself, I laugh, I'm having a good time there all by myself, and my hands literally shake sometimes with excitement of what I'm drawing. They shake all the time.
That's wonderful.
Anyway, but sometimes I do get excited.
But then they really shake.
Yeah, it really is fun.
Yeah. Pigpen. What does that phrase mean?
Pigpen came from a friend of mine who used to call his children by funny names, and I can remember playing bridge with him one night, and his little boy was running around the living room, and he says, "Go to bed, Pigpen," and I thought that would make a good title for a comic character, so I created, like with Peppermint Patty, I created the character to fit the name.
Pigpen has not been seen in a while.
No, I never can think of funny ideas with him being in the dust. Now, I don't know, there's a Sunday page where he's won a tennis tournament, and somebody said, what kind of a tournament was it? And he said, the Clay Court Championship. And that's the first appearance that Pigpen has made in a long time.
How many people start the day, or end the day, whichever, with the Peanut strip?
Oh, I've been told that our daily readership is about 100 million.
What?
Yeah. Things like that are best,
million.
yeah. Things like that are best not thought of.
But you say the readers will complain occasionally about when you're not true to the characters. Something. Do they ever send in ideas and say, why don't you complicate this character a little more? Why don't you get a new boyfriend for someone, or you know, that sort of thing? Yeah,
this brings up something kind of interesting, because readers always want their wishes fulfilled. Now, you remember when Little Abner married Daisy May? That was the worst thing that ever happened in a comic strip. It just that destroyed it. Well, what happened to me, and I discovered this, it was a revelation. Not often do we get revelations, but about 6 weeks ago, my secretary came in one day, and she said that evening her little boy had come home from school. He had taken off his jacket, slammed it down on the couch, and said, "Mom, I feel just like Charlie Brown." And all of a sudden it came to me, that's the purpose of Charlie Brown. It's like a line of poetry. She knew how he felt. He didn't have to say anything else. It was defined. His emotions were defined right there, just like a line of more important poetry. And I think this is the purpose that cartoon characters sometimes have. So it works.
How much do we know about you from reading
Everything.
Charlie?
I have said that if you read the strip every day, that is me, because everything that I know, everything I've ever read, heard, listened to, said, goes into that strip, and it's me. There's no more of me, nor is there any less of me. That's me right there.
Charles, if I may call you that, are there likely to be any new characters introduced into the strip in the future? Have you ruled that out?
You know, every time I say no, I end up coming up with a new one. There will be some little French children in a movie that we're just starting now. We're doing a movie, I would like to call it Bon Voyage, Charlie Brown, and Don't Come Back. But I don't think I'm going to get away with that. But the kids are going to go over to England and to France as exchange students, and they will obviously meet some little French characters, and they will be the newest characters. But they will not appear in the strip, they will appear in the movie.
Is the character in fact Charles Brun in France, and what would it be?
Violetta.
Karl Braun in Germany and so on. I wonder, do they call them by the the national names? Do they change the names in Japan?
Yes.
Do they say Charlie Brown?
I don't know what they're in Japan, but I have seen the films in Japan. It's very big in Japan, and it is funny to listen to those characters speak in Japanese.
Oh yes, that is. That's when you see Gunsmoke dubbed in Japanese too. That
Snoopy is called
funny.
Schnaben in Sweden. I know
Schnaben.
that. Schnaben. That's a good name.
I wonder what he's in. Perhaps in Germany. That's a, yeah.
I know, but I can't think under pressure.
Do you answer the mail that you get from people? Do you try to, or ever answer it in the persona of the characters from your younger readers?
Now and then we have, when we get a whole host of mail because of something special happening and we can't answer it personally, then we have special form letters made up as if Charlie Brown had written them in his own scratchy lettering.
Mm-hmm.
But we do answer every letter that comes in.
I wondered if Charles Browns all over the world have written to you and said, you're obviously using my name.
There's been one someplace, I think up in Seattle, who claims that he had thought of Charlie Brown before I did and I stole the whole thing from him. That's kind of scary, too.
It is, yes. Especially if he sent you a photograph and he had a big round head and... Quickly, as a kid, did you have a favorite goal? I mean, did you want to be any... Did you want to work for Walt Disney, for example? We only have 30 seconds for you to answer.
Yes, as soon as I got out of high school, I sent in an application for Walt Disney, filled it out, mailed it in, and they turned me down.
Oh,
so that was the way.
I'm sorry. Well, you'll succeed at something one of these days. Mr. Schulz, thank you for this further glimpse into the world of Peanuts, and I doubt if the rest of the country or other countries will ever get enough of it. I hope you go on and on as long as you want to, and even longer. Tomorrow night is my final show from San Francisco. And we will have three of the city's leading lights here tomorrow night: Herbert Gold, Bill Pearson, and Sarah McFadden. And again, thanks to you and the gang.
Thank you, Dick. See you tomorrow night.